So welcome everyone. Today's topic is how to inspect a property in a pandemic. So we have our preferred inspector, George Wyatt. So thank you, George, for joining today. And the reason why we decided to bring George is because not only is he a great home inspector, but he is also a real estate investor. So he's doing flips, he's done buy and holds, so he knows what to look for the property. So thank you for joining us, George. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Hugo. Thanks for having me. For those of you that don't know me, my name is George Wyatt. I own First Advantage Home Inspection. And like Hugo said, I'm doing the same thing that you're trying to do. I've been in the construction industry. I started building new construction in the early 2000s, all the way up to the crash. Then been flipping for the last, I don't know, about 9-10 years. And then recently, about 2 years ago, we started buying rental properties. I met Hugo a couple of years ago, and I tried to help investors not make mistakes. So meaning, when you get a house under contract, you usually have 5 days to do your home inspection. So we always tell people, don't be afraid, pull the trigger, buy the house. You're not buying it until after I inspect it, after the attorneys review all the contracts. So typically you have 10 days to get on any contract. So the house I'm going to show you today wasn't an investor. It was just a regular homeowner, which she ended up not buying it. She's a single mom, and there was just too many repairs, and the seller wasn't, they were willing to do some repairs, but not everything, and she just couldn't afford to do everything else. So we'll go through this report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So anyhow, I do offer a couple different inspections for investors and only for investors. I try to help newer investors with their scope of work and make sure that your budget aligns with the work that needs to be performed. So let's get started. So this was just a simple little buy level, about 1,300 square feet. This was in Markham. These are the kind of houses you want to buy for flip or for rental. This would have made a good property for either one if the price was right. This was a retail property, so this wouldn't have made good sense for us to buy as a flip or a rental. All right, so typically when I do the inspection, I start on the outside, and I start from the top and work my way down. So we usually when you pull up to a property, as Hugo will tell you, you want to check out the neighborhood. You want to check out, is there a bunch of dumpy houses on the block? You want to get a feel for the neighborhood when you're investing. One of the other things I tell people is look out for big, huge trees in the front yard. Big, huge trees usually create havoc on the driveways, the sewers, the sidewalks, the foundation. So I'm a little leery of buying those types of houses, but we do inspect everything that, and you'll see in this inspection, there was a tree that did cause some damage. So here, if you could see this roof, I mean, the roof itself was in pretty good shape. It wasn't too old, but there's a lifted shingle here, which is a really simple fix at this point. Just put a little tar on that and stick it back down. So you don't want to not buy a house for something so simple as that. Now the garage roof was in pretty bad shape. If you could see right here, this was a hole right here. All of this section here was damaged. As you can see here, they tried patching it, not very well. You can see at the edge, this here on the face here is called the fascia, and the shingles shouldn't hang over that. Otherwise, the water can get back and get underneath the shingles right in these areas, and you'll see what it does when the shingles don't hang over. As you can see here, see the water damage here? This is because the water's got up underneath the shingles and started to deteriorate the sheeting. See here, you can see where water is getting inside the garage. Now this is just the garage. We don't get too crazy and goofy, but you know, to tear that roof off and replace it probably cost about anywhere from $1,500 to $1,700. So you can see more water damage here. And here, through my report, you'll see there's a lot of stuff that doesn't apply, but these are all the things that if they do apply, that I would inspect. And they were moving, so it's pretty hard to inspect the garage when we have this much stuff inside the garage. But people are moving, it's typical. They're getting ready for the move. Okay, then we go up into the gutters and you can see these are totally clogged, filled with water, leaves. And what you want these, even on your personal homes, you should clean these out at least once a year. If you have a lot of trees, probably twice a year. When that water gets filled up and then it gets up underneath these shingles and gets behind the fascia, and you start getting rot behind the fascia because the fascia is nailed to the wood. And this was the back gutter in the back of the house with the big, huge tree, and this was the front. But you can still see there's a lot of leaves and debris in there. Okay, I'm a big advocate about downspouts. I've seen a lot of damage caused by downspouts being dumped right next to the house. Over time, that just the ground disintegrates, and typically the foundation can start to settle, which causes cracks into the foundation, causes bricks to crack, the mortar in between the bricks crack, and it becomes a big problem. I don't like splash blocks because typically they sink and then they get back pitched and the water still runs towards the house. So little $6-7 flexible spout, get that about 6-7 feet away from the house and you should be good. Some more damage on the garage right in this area. That was wide open. I don't know if an animal got in here or what. Made a big hole inside here. That's another thing. You don't want the trees or anything close to the roof. One, it could damage the roof. Two is animals crawl up the trees and they get on the roof and they'll chew holes in the shingles, fascia, siding, whatever they can to get in the house. As you can see here, Handyman Special tried to repair this. That should all be torn off and redone. Okay, so the lot, my hand is pointing towards the foundation. We want all of the drainage to be typically a 10% grade going away from the house. So all the water that comes down here runs away from the house, not towards the house. Water standing up against the foundation causes cracks, and the dirt's heavy enough without the water. Water's really heavy, and that starts cracking, freezing, and that's why we want the dirt to be away. Now, some people fill it with mulch. Not a good idea. Just black dirt, slope it away. All right, front windowsill. See the mortar is cracked out here. All the caulking around here. Want that to be caulked so you don't want water to get behind there. The wood is right behind this capping on the window. And you can see this is what I was talking about where the bricks start cracking. See this here? All of these, this is very minor. This can be repaired. When it starts getting a little more serious is when the bricks start cracking in half. But as long as it's cracking down the mortar joints, just get a tuck point. This is just cosmetic defect. This is just a corner. Somebody ran into the garage. And I thought this was stone, but it was just some kind of stone panel. So this is, we recommended that they caulk that just to keep water out. Okay, people see these types of cracks. That's common. We live in the Midwest. The ground freezes and your house actually moves in this Midwest. So when we see these little cracks on the outside, we make a note of it. And then when we go inside, we make sure that there's no water intrusion. At this point, this is just a settlement crack and it's not a structural problem. All right, you see this patio here. You see how this is all cracked? It doesn't reveal in the picture, but that was probably about a 2-inch settlement crack. And it's, I don't know if I have a picture. And then this is the garage. I don't have a picture of it. There was about 100-year-old tree right over here. So it was cracking the garage floor, the patio, and some of the driveway. So that's why I said be mindful of big trees. One of the reasons I picked out this inspection, something you're going to want to look at. I was going to buy a house with 3 of these big, huge trees, and we were going to buying it cheap, mind you, and I don't ever recommend buying a house like this. We were going to gut all of the interior walls and cut all the floor out. It was a slab house, and there was spots where it was a 4-inch trip hazard. That's how bad the foundation was. Recommend buying those houses. This here, if it was me and I was going to flip this or I was going to rent this, I would just fill all of the cracks. Now, with that being said, sometimes the villages will make you cut it out and replace it. So it depends. Every village may override me. So it's give you a direction to go, and sometimes have a different way you want to fix. They want you to fix it. Okay, so on the garage doors, you have 2 eyeballs, one on each side of the garage door. On this particular house, they worked. Basically, if a kid's running under or a dog runs under there, the sensors grab that, and then the door automatically goes back up. There should be another sensor inside the opener that notices if this garage door comes down onto a kid, a car, a bicycle, notices any kind of tension, that door is supposed to go back up. And that wasn't doing that. So I took a picture of it. Sorry, I'm breezing right past this. It's just kind of telling us the crawl space, poured concrete, kind of beam, what kind of joist. So all this would be in a report. With that being said, I do, like I was telling you in the beginning, I do 2 kinds of inspections. One, just kind of walk with you, talk, still a full inspection. You take pictures, you take notes, and then I do the inspection where you would get this full, I take all the notes, I take all the pictures, and it's pretty detailed. Sometimes people use this report to go back to the sellers to try to get a price reduction. And when people say the houses are sold as is, it is sold as is. If it's the windows, the flooring, the cabinets, the toilet, it's when you start getting into cracks, things that a regular investor or a regular person would not know. Mold in the attic, structural problems in the attic, cracked foundations, that kind of stuff, in my opinion, shouldn't be as is. Is anybody there? Question? Yeah, we always want to see what kind of panel it is. We want to see what kind of size the panel is. This is, you can barely see it, but this was a 200 amp panel. I typically always pull the cover off. See some stuff behind the panel, but in this particular case, the homeowner built, that's what this is, the panel is less than 3 feet clearance. They built this big, huge cabinet or closet right in front, and I could not get my tool in there to take this panel off. You always want these breakers. The reason we take the cover off is to make sure the wire size matches the breakers. There's a reason for that, so it prevents fires. All of these we want labeled properly. Here's a couple screws missing. That have to be a little more detailed when it's a homeowner than for an investor. And now we're in the crawl space. And you see all these wires hanging out here. That should have a cover on it. This here, just teaching here, this is a floor joist here. It's a floor joist. This is what they call a sill plate. We're always looking at that, especially when the ground is pitched towards the house. This will be, that rots out and the whole floor starts sinking. Okay, this was a brand new outlet. The seller told me personally, oh, we just changed that. However, they must have did it themselves. I know you can't probably see in this picture, but these two are orange lights. That's when it's wired correctly. It's a red and an orange light when it's not wired correctly, and a GFCI cannot work if it's wired backwards. So they did put a new one in there, but it still wasn't working properly. Light fixtures, probably 50 to 75% of light fixtures are always loose. There's only so far you can tighten these. I always recommend that you put clear silicone around where the light fixture meets the wall. Serves two purposes. One, to make it so it's not loose, and two, so water doesn't get inside the light fixture. This is just nonsense, probably just a bulb burned out, adequate, didn't work. We check that, turn the furnace on, always check the air conditioner and the furnace. Air conditioner cannot be checked if it's too cold out. We can compressor, but here you can see I made sure it lit. We want to make sure these flames inside the furnace are blue. It's burning correctly. Okay, this is what used to be an electronic air cleaner, which was damaged. It's fine that they still put a filter in here, but all that air, so all the heat and all of the air conditioning is coming out of this hole. So I recommended that they get rid of this, have a heating guy seal that open. Air conditioner was working fine, but you see this here, this line right here, that's the part that actually gets cold, and that's what the Freon goes through here. So this gets really, really cold. So you want the insulation to cover it. So when it's 90, 95 degrees out, you want that not to work as hard to stay cold. And this was leaking all over the floor. Nothing was glued together. This is the condensate line. So that was an easy fix. It's just a matter of gluing all the fittings back together. check all the plumbing, we flush all the toilets, we run all the sinks. Naturally, we can't see behind the walls, but we check whatever we can. Just telling the seller, buyer where the shutoff for the main shutoff for the water was. Water heaters can never have a plastic, there's what's called a temperature relief valve or TPR valve. It's a little valve at the top of the water heater. In case this builds up too much pressure, there's a valve there that it opens. Most villages will not allow this plastic. That needs to be steel or copper. Copper, gas pipe, can't be plastic. All right, so we were telling them, because even if you have good water pressure today, which the house did have good water pressure, but we did tell the seller or the buyer that all the pipes are galvanized, and galvanized pipe can corrode and start clogging the day after I check it. So we just want to warn them that, and the only way to fix it is to redo all the water pipes, and that can be kind of pricey. There's a bunch of corrosion in the basement that we see, and that's why we brought it up. So this one was a pretty big deal, right? This is your plumbing stack where it comes out the roof, also all of your sewer gas from your toilets and all of that come out the roof. The thing wrong with this picture is there's no pipe sticking out. So when I went in the attic, the pipe should come out at a minimum of 6 inches above the roof line. So it should be up here somewhere. And it was just dumping into the attic. So here you can see this is the pipe, not a real good picture, but it barely breaks the roof height there. I don't think that would be a terrible expense to fix, but our job to tell you. And this here was very loose. So instead of breaking the wall open, I said what I would do is just silicone around this and silicone around the shower head and make it secure and make it tight, and it will keep water from getting back behind the tile and rotting the wood. All of this, all the caulk or the grout was wore out, and these tiles here and these tiles here were all starting to heave already, so that all needed to be regrouted. Here. Same thing with the other bathroom, staying really loose. So same thing around here, caulked. And some of you might see this at your own houses. You can caulk and caulk and caulk, and the black stuff keeps coming back out because you're not getting rid of the moisture and the mold that's behind the caulk. So to fix it, you need to rip all this caulk out, dry it, clean it really, really good, and then re-caulk it. This had a jacuzzi tub, so I always try to fill it, make sure it runs. This is a horrible picture. I don't want to be a photographer, but underneath here, this is one of those concrete laundry tubs. And we tested it, and there was a big puddle under the floor. Right here was cracked. So changing that. This is just more of a cosmetic defect, but if it's, how do you match the tile, right? So we tell you about it. And this one cracked here too. So there was no extra tiles. We asked the seller because they were there. There was no extra tiles. They bought it with a house like that. These windows here, most of the windows were in great shape, except for these three. These were they had like a big picture window here and then 2 double hung windows on each side. This was I call it guillotine windows. went to lift it up and that thing's slammed right back down. So kind of dangerous. So, and this window, see the vinyl here is all cracked. This was the bathroom. First had some damage, doorknob was loose. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you expect when you're buying these kind of houses. Not a big issue. Like I said, we're looking for the bigger stuff, like the galvanized pipe. That would be a big one. Repairing the garage roof, the concrete patio, stuff like that. That's what we're there to check. But for a regular buyer, we have to check everything. So we're going to be living. We expect to spend money when we're buying. So this cabinet was dangerous. It was right over the laundry sink, and I don't know what was holding it up. I was afraid once I touched it, it was going to fall off the walls. So it's just probably just a bulb plugged out in the closet. And I accidentally erased the pictures for this, but we typically would take pictures of all of the insulation in the attic. The insulation was fine. Typically, I have 4 or 5 pictures in here of insulation. Crawl space, this is what's called, in the crawl space, this plastic is called a vapor barrier. Typically, you want that in any crawl space. And what it does is it keeps the moisture in the ground and keeps it from coming up into the home. Because up here is all wood. That moisture will eventually create mold. It could create rot, depending on how much moisture is coming out of the ground. Now, they did have a moisture barrier in here. It just needs to be spread back out. Here, see the insulation is falling off the walls. This wall right here, on the other side is living space. So I would recommend that these all get insulated. All this insulation falling off the walls. And this wall is where the bathroom is and all your plumbing's here. So I would definitely highly recommend that all this wall gets insulated. Okay, so this is your panel going into the attic. If you're going to insulate all of your ceiling, you should insulate this panel also. Typically, I tell people just cut a piece of 2-inch foam board, put some 3M foam tape around here. Now your heat, your air conditioning is not going right out the roof. Appliances, I don't know if any of you, what your opinion is of Samsung. I'll give you mine. I think that you're buying the name. I've had them in a couple of my rental properties and nothing but problems. You see most of the burner is not working here. This knob doesn't turn. Stove worked, the oven worked, but had its issues. Microwave, every time I turn it on, and run for about 3 seconds and shut off. So effective. And this is kind of a big deal if you're gonna, because this fence was, I mean, you see right here, they've already tried to repair it. This thing was beyond being repaired. This thing needed major work to fix it. So you'd either have to tear it down, because you see all these trees are growing right up next to it and forcing it. So all those pictures and everything I talked about is all wrapped up at the end of the report at the summary, and it just goes through everything we just talked about. So that way you don't have to, you can see how long the report is. This way you can see in one place where all the defects are. So that's all I really have, Hugo. So it's the end of the report. Anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, that's all I got.
That was awesome, George. Thank you very much. So I have a couple of questions for you, George. Obviously, you show a lot of details, which is great. I mean, that's something that we as investors need to know about, especially to have it in a written report to make a counter offer, right? Hopefully to get some credit on the property. And not only that, but potentially not follow through the transaction if it has major issues. So my question to you as inspector, as a real estate investor is, what are the big ticket items that you worry about? What are the showstoppers for you to not continue with the transaction and to cancel the contract? Because we just want to focus obviously on the things that will cause us to lose money. We want to stay away from them. So what's your thought on that, and what's your opinion?
Well, I guess it would come back to price. How much are you buying the property for?
Okay.
Because nothing really scares me unless it's a huge foundation issue. I just did a 6 flat for somebody last week and I wouldn't have bought that. It was all the boiler pipes would have had to been changed. The foundation was good, but there was a stairwell that went up 3 stories and the whole foundation, the wood that was holding it up was messed up. So I thought it would be 150,000 rehab. So, but what the big things are, the roof, that could be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. The plumbing, we want to make sure that, and some of these houses that we're going to buy, Hugo, are bank owned, right? So the water's not
Right.
on. Uh,
Right.
all we can do is we can look at if it's galvanized pipe. I'm going to venture to say if I'm keeping it as a rental, I want to change it now. If it's a flip, I'm not as apt to change that because if it's working at the time of the sale, I mean, once you sell it, it's not yours anymore, right? So,
Right.
uh, so I do some things a little different. If I check the furnace, I check the air conditioning, we check the insulation in the attic, but the big ones are foundation issues, or if your scope of work doesn't line up with your numbers have to make sense, right? So uh, if you're paying 50 and you plan on putting 20 in it and you're keeping it as a rental and it's $100,000 back end, that makes sense. If you're 50 and then now you have to put 35, 40, can you afford to keep money stuck in the deal, right? Or on a flip, you have to, I mean, I used to be, I'd want to make 20% on my money on a flip. Um, so now I'll go down to 15 because the deals are getting a little harder to get. But so it basically comes down to money and what's your comfortable factor. Newer investors shouldn't be going for gut rehabs, in my opinion. Um, Basically, you want cosmetic stuff, a kitchen, maybe a bathroom, flooring, paint, maybe a minor plumbing, minor electric. Uh, but to take on a gut rehab when you're brand new I've seen a lot of people, and you've probably seen it too, Hugo, where the investor
Right.
ran out of money and they're selling it and it's half done. Um, and they're taking a bath. They just want to be done with it. So my job, and I take it pretty personal, is I don't want you to see you or any of your students or any of the people on the call to be one and done, right? So I I want to be there to answer questions. I want to be there to give them guesstimates on what things cost because the problem is people ask me all the time, well, how much is that going to cost? And I'm like, well, I'm going to get way better pricing than the average person that's just starting out. It's just there's nothing you can do about it. When I first started building houses, my first house took me 2 years and it cost me a fortune because you're brand new, right? And nobody knows you. When I finished building houses, I was doing that same house in about 3.5 to 4 months. And my prices went way down because I was giving these people a lot of work. I was able to find better places to buy materials. And I'm still learning, just as you are probably, Hugo.
Absolutely.
You never stop learning. And when you stop learning, and people that say they've never lost money doing real estate, I find that hard to believe. If you've never lost money, you've been lucky. So it's real estate gods have a very funny sense of humor, and there's houses that go really smooth, and then there's houses that I just did one, and I've been doing this a long time, and it was a disaster. From the contractors to the village to the holding times to coronavirus to it was a mess. So it happens, but we want to try to make sure that you're not going to make all of the mistakes that you have control over. You have control over how much you're going to pay for it, what contractors you're going to hire. Always try to get recommendations, and just try not to buy a lemon. And that's where I come in. But just don't be fearful. I know so many people that are so afraid to put an offer because they feel they're stuck with the house, but you're never stuck with a house. You have plenty of time to get out of that contract.
Absolutely.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Thank you very much, George. There's another question on the line by Mark. He's asking, tell me your prices again.
Okay, for an average house, which is typically we're built buying average houses, typically up to about 1,500, maybe 1,700, up to 1,500 square feet. I charge $275 for the walk and talk, and $400 for the same house with a report. And then every 500 square feet, it goes up 25 bucks. So it's typically I'll spend as much time at the inspection with you to go over whatever questions you have to make you feel comfortable. And after the inspection, I'm always available by text or phone, as long as you don't take advantage of me and suck the life out of me. I will help you as much as I can.
Perfect. There's another question on the line by Andrea. She's asking, for homes that do not have ceiling lights in the bedrooms, do you typically recommend adding them? If so, how much should we calculate in cost?
Hi, Andrea. I just did one for her. She's probably asking for her house in Oak Forest, and I did. I like ceiling lights in bedrooms if it's in the budget, because I always do a wish list when I do my scope of work. And then some of these kind of things, if I have an overage on something else, sometimes you have to take stuff off of your list. So for a rental, I'm going to keep it forever and ever. If I got to show the house in the dark, just to me, I don't think it's a big deal to add lights. I think it's $100 a light to put it in. So I don't think it's, I would say yes, I would definitely do it. If your budget's really, really tight, because typically they're on switched outlets in the older homes, if there's no lights, then just put a lamp in every room that they can turn the light on when they go into the room. But I like lights in the ceiling. I think that's more of a, what do you do, Hugo? Do you add lights or no?
Absolutely, absolutely. Oftentimes the bedrooms, they just have a light switch to the outlet. So you need to connect like a stand-up lamp. So we do the electric work to have a ceiling lamp. So we like to put a fan, ceiling fan that has, the fan, the lighting. And if it's in a better neighborhood, we're gonna add the can lights. So that's 75 each can light. So we're gonna spend about 300, 4 in each bedroom. So it's about 300 for just the can lights. That includes labor and material.
Right.
Yeah, definitely lighting is critical for sure. And living rooms and dining rooms is a must. We do can lights For sure.
Yeah,
That just helps bring the value. Lighting is so critical when you show the property, either for a renter or for a flip.
well, even if you did a nice rehab, you want to show it off, right? So you want it to be light and bright. So
Absolutely.
even for
And
rentals, I mean, people are used to walking in the room, flipping on a switch, and the light goes on. So to me, it's a small expense to pay. Uh, so I would say yes, put the lights in.
absolutely. There's another question on the line by Mark. George, would you recommend your contractor?
I would, but I'm not going to give them away. And Mark, I
That's
want to
funny.
tell you that's the biggest problem in this business. You'd think I would have it figured out, and I don't. We went through, I don't know, 20 contractors in the last 10 years. Some start out great, and then I don't know if they take on too much work, they get hooked on drugs, drinking, whatever the case is. I'll tell you the difference when I used to build new construction homes, and nothing, not taken away from any contractors if you're on the line. But when I was building new construction, those people expected not to get paid for 30, 60, 90 days, right? Totally different type of contract. The contractors you find now are chasing check to check, week to week. And it's frustrating, but to get the pricing that we need to do rehabs, we can't pay union plumbers, union electricians, and union carpenters. We would never be able to buy houses. So you're finding that guy that can do a little bit of everything at a reasonable price. So your biggest issue going forward, and what should always be looking and always trying to find, even if you don't have any work for them, try to find that next contract. And the guy I have right now, I wish I could clone him to about 50 more guys. And then I'd buy every house I could find. But that's my biggest issue right now is finding good properties and finding good contractors.
Absolutely. That's
You
always
always
been
want to get a recommendation. If anybody or ask them for recommendations, and Andrew Holmes and me disagree on this. He likes a no scope of work. I always do a scope of work. That way, at the end of the project, you're not fighting with the contractor saying, well, this wasn't included, this was included, this is extra. Because his thing is if you show him that it's too much on that scope of work, then the price goes up. But I don't like confrontation, and I don't, I like to be in writing and that they follow the scope of work. And never, ever, ever give a contractor money up front.
right. Absolutely. So, friends, I want to emphasize a few points that George just mentioned. So, as an investor, things that you need to be very careful because there are the high ticket items. He mentioned foundation as number one, okay? Roof, mechanicals, okay? Those are the big ticket items. And obviously, if you need to redo the mechanical system, HVAC, heating and cooling, that's going to be expensive, $7,000 to $12,000. So each high ticket item is going to be close to 10,000. Roof, foundation could be even more. Electric, plumbing. So one of the things that I want to emphasize is that however much George charges is nothing. You need to think not only like the ordinary investor. Ordinary investor thinks, how much is that going to cost me for the report? No, you need to think like the pros do, okay? You need to think about value. How much value am I getting from George's inspection? It's huge. I look at two types of immense value. Number one, his report is going to serve us whether we're going to move forward with the deal, which is huge because that can save us thousands and thousands and thousands if we buy the wrong property. Number two, if we decide to move forward with the deal, I'm going to use his report for two things. Number one, I'm going to use that to counter offer the seller. I would like to get some credit for the amount of work that we're gonna do. Even if it's 1,000, 2,000, anything is gonna help. Number two, I'm gonna use his report to build my scope of work, because when I walk the property, I'm gonna miss a lot of stuff that George wants. Does that make sense? So I'm gonna use his detailed scope of work to create, his detailed report to create my scope of work that I'm gonna present or submit to the lender. Does that make sense? Because like that, I'm gonna make sure that I'm not gonna be under budget, that I'm gonna be asking the lender for the right scope of work, okay? So that is how I utilize his report. So the money that we've invested with George, we've made it 20 times fold. It is that incredible, okay? So I hear a lot of people that, since they're buying the house as is, they skip the inspection report. That's a huge mistake, because you might end up buying a piece of junk and losing a lot of money. So super important, friends. Think of this as an insurance policy, okay, that is going to save you thousands down the road. So you need to think like the pros do. The value that you are getting is change, okay? So it's sort of like a must. Like when you use an attorney for your transaction, you've got to have an inspection on the property. So George has saved us thousands and thousands of dollars. And not only that, one of the things that I really like about George, aside from his knowledge, is that you can ask him on how much things are going to cost. He's going to give you a rough idea. And as he mentioned earlier, he can get better prices, but at least you're going to have a good idea. And most inspectors won't give you that because they don't want the liability, right? So, but George, because he's an investor, he understands costs of what it takes to repair, to replace. So that's an added bonus of his services. Are there any other questions on the line? So thank you, George, for your valuable time, for the great information you shared with us today. I greatly appreciate it.